2025, where we are still fighting for basic human rights, not women's rights.
She was 9 years old and she went to the court, and that's how she managed to escape from that marriage.
When I can give other people a voice, but then I would say they have a voice. It's just us who have not been listening.
Oops, I'm pregnant. Oh my God, what now?
Welcome to the She Word, conversations that women rarely have, but really should. When I was invited to sit at this table with two powerhouses of women, I didn't even blink. The answer was absolutely. And in this very special edition of the She Word, I'm honoured to be with two women who've not only held positions of influence in their home country of the Netherlands, but made activism, feminism, and compassion a lifestyle choice. Dutch politician and activist Lilianne Ploumen was leader of the Labour Party from January 2021 until April 2022. She's been a member of the House of Representatives since 2017, as well as a parliamentary leader since 2021. Lilianne previously served as Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation from 2012 until 2017. While still at university, Lilianne became a community outreach worker in Rotterdam, starting her journey as a change maker. In 2017, Lilianne Ploumen started the She Decides campaign, an initiative of over 50 countries, organizations and foundations to finance global family planning initiatives after the US halt to such programs left NGOs worldwide without large funding. Also, in 2017, Lilianne Ploumen was awarded Dame Commander of the Order of St. Gregory the Great. Ms. Ploumen also works with the Bureau Clara Wichman, a legal fund to advance women's rights, where she's investigating conditions in women's prisons. We are also joined at the table by Madam Ambassador Djoeke Adimi, Dutch Ambassador to Malta. Madam Ambassador also has an outstanding list of posts and positions, having coordinated and led task force dealing with Afghanistan, the Middle East, Brexit, and represented the Netherlands dealing with economics, policy, foreign affairs, all over the world. Madam Ambassador also has a passion for women and women's rights. And whilst her position here in Malta is as ambassador, she has taken time to empower and encourage the women of Malta in the issues facing us today. It is an absolute honor to be sitting at this table with two women who have really been part of shaping the future of their country, but also passionate about empowerment and the future of women today. I normally start by asking if I've missed out any details, but I can imagine that there's huge backstories to do with both of you amazing ladies. So I'm going to ask you to share the most important details about yourself and also the areas of your career and your current work that you are most proud of.
Well, Madam Ambassador, you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think most proud, I think of the fact that I actually became an ambassador, because I'm coming from a rural background, not the normal people who you would think they become diplomats. And well, the first achievement was that I got accepted into the diplomatic class, which was a very big surprise. Of course, I thought myself, of course I can do this, but I thought, they want different kinds of people. But then I thought, you just give it a try, you just give it a shot, you apply, and round by round, I moved up further, and then in the end, they picked me, and I'm like, wow. So that was a big achievement. But then in the end, to also make it, to become an ambassador is really a big honor, to be allowed to represent my country abroad. And then in my work, always, I think the leading factor has been I'm very much into people. And my job as a diplomat is all about people. So I get to do the most wonderful job, in my opinion, that there is in the world. I work with people all the time. It can be people in developing countries, so they're very poor people, underprivileged people. But I also work with politicians, because those are your counterparts that you speak to. You talk to young people, old people, all sorts of people, and you work for Dutch tourists who get into problems. You work for businesses, companies that come to a country, want to make contacts, and you can help them make contacts. I still remember that I really enjoyed when I had a team of journalists visiting the embassy where I then worked, and they needed to have some contacts to make a documentary about that country. So there I was, feeling myself half a producer, because I was phoning up, and they were like, at the end of the afternoon, I had this whole list of people that they could contact, and they were like, "Wow, you should apply for our job." It's nice. It's a very nice job to do, and that has always been very inspiring.
Can I ask you, I think we always assume that in our roles, in our jobs, no matter what you do, that it's the big, glamorous, wonderful and amazing achievements that mean the most. But I can remember in my career, there was one particular occasion where I had the opportunity to make impact only to 3 people, but the ripple effect of having those 3 people decide during the course of my radio show that they were going to adopt, and they'd been contemplating it, and we had a lady on the show. And sometimes it's the smaller things that really make you feel as if your job is complete. You could stop doing what you're doing today and you've done your job. Has there ever been a moment that you can identify where you say, you know what, that was that moment?
I think the whole career has been a whole line of these kind, because I'm also humble enough to see that, a single person, what kind of real impact or change can you make to the world? However, you can make really impacts and differences for the people. You do it at all levels. You help people and they are very grateful to you. But sometimes also you make things really impactful. Of course, I've worked in Yemen, which is a country now, well, at the moment it's a big war. When I was there, it's not. But if you talk about women's rights and the position of women, Yemen is a country where you can't stop. There is so much to do there. And I worked there also on child marriages. Unfortunately, that is still taking place in Yemen, and now it's even more again than it used to be under the current situation. But children, sometimes as young as 9 or 10 years old, are married sometimes to men of 30, 40 years old. And that's done because of the situation of the family usually. Girls are a burden. At least they're considered to be a burden. And if you marry them off, they become the burden of the husband. But you've done your job as parents, because you make sure that she's taken care of. These are terrible situations. And then to be able, as an embassy, to provide a platform to actually start and help address this issue, to make it something that people are starting a conversation about, that we should maybe not do this anymore. These things make you really proud that you can contribute to it. And I'm trying to figure out what we actually did, because of course the girl herself, this was a specific girl who did it, who I'm talking about. She was a very special little girl, because she had the courage to actually go to a court and ask a lawyer because she knew that lawyers are people that can help me. So she was 9 years old and she went to the court, and she just, every lawyer that she saw passing by, she asked, like, "Can you help me? Can you help me?" And then finally, of course, one good lawyer said, like, "Yes, of course. And what's the matter?" And that's how she managed to escape from that marriage. We organized some events around it to raise the awareness and to actually really make it a discussion that was then at that stage made in Yemen. But these are really impactful moments.
Madam Ambassador, I'm so thrilled that you're at this table, and you made me goosebumpy even just telling these stories. And I'm really excited to be talking more about this. Can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, and I had some time to reflect, of course. But let me start by saying that I mean, our backgrounds are quite common. So my parents had to leave school after 5 or 6 years and work at the farm of their parents. And so here I am, one generation later, basically. I mean, I became a minister, a politician, and I think for my parents, that would have been incredible. I mean, they would have never doubted that I could do it, or my sister or my brother. They had like great faith in us. But of course, where they came from, decision makers was a totally different world where they would never think that they would be able to enter that. And so that's, of course, the great thing about progress. So it's not per se my own doing. It's also the context in our country that made it possible, for me to study. And even if my parents were not very affluent, I could still afford to study. And so it's really very special to see how, like, as a collective, as a country, you can do the right things for the people that live there. And so, so I'm actually quite proud of my parents, who, even if they never had gone to university, so they didn't know what that would be and what kind of life, you would lead. And so they could have easily said, I had to move out and, go to a different city, 2.5 hours away. I mean, that was a big thing. They could have said, maybe not, maybe stay closer to home and choose a different study. But they didn't. They said, well, okay, we think it's quite scary, but okay, off you go. And so I think if you ask me if I'm proud of anything, I always start by saying this, because I'm very proud of my parents, that they just let us go wherever we thought would be the good thing to do. And so, and I've been able to work with amazing people. And I've also I'm always very conscious of the platform that I am granted in politics. It's all about the platform, the podium that you have to make use of it in a way that really improves the lives of other people. I mean, that's basically what I think. What's it about? I mean, what the ambassador said about trying to end child marriages in Yemen. I mean, these are the issues where a country like ours and people like we can really help make a difference, not by going to a country and saying, we think you should do it this way. No, but to listen to what people have to say and also listen to what they ask from you. I mean, that's like, so you can have your own opinions, you should. But I think, in my line of work, I really try to listen and then be sensitive to what people need. So, for example, people would say, "Oh, I love it when I can give other people a voice." But then I would say they have a voice. It's just us who have not been listening, or it's like their society who doesn't allow them to speak up, or if they speak up, they're sanctioned. They do have a voice. So I think we should be very conscious of that also. So I'm not shy. I know I did a good job. I'm not going to say, oh, I should have done this or that. I really did a good job. And it was only possible because I learned to listen and to others. Yeah.
You both have these amazing stories of determination, because you both mentioned coming from a background that wouldn't naturally lead you to where you are today. And I think that in itself, every time I hear these stories of women who've really made it their goal to step forward and lead, I'm full of real heartfelt joy, because I think we as women can often feel that we don't have the power, the empowerment, the authority, the means to be able to do that. And I think quite often that comes from within, because of our cultural nuances and the way that culture is sort of structured. And the both of you sharing those stories, first of all, has just made me big smile, big smile. But it leads me nicely on to the next question, because there are a lot of opportunities for women and we need to just go out and grab them. And we can be our own worst enemy. You both mentioned, you mentioned that your parents didn't say, okay, no, go and do that, but they didn't say you couldn't. And I think that is also extraordinarily important, that even if you don't understand what your child wants to do, the fact that you don't stand in front of them and stop them from doing it. Now, I'm going to ask you respectfully, as with me, I've seen a great deal of change. And in the 70s, the 80s, there was very much the message of empowerment for women. And we talk about women's rights, and women's rights are basically human rights. There are no difference between women's rights and human rights. They've been packaged up in a probably more convenient way to dismiss. But what are you seeing as the opportunities? We're going to talk about the challenges in a second, but what are you seeing as the opportunities for women today that perhaps weren't available or more difficult to negotiate when you started out in your careers?
Well, I mean, for a starter, I was very used in my first jobs to be the only woman in the room. And so you would have like a business meeting, and then I would be the only woman in the room, and they would call me girl, because of course I'm not a very tall woman. I was like, 27. That would be totally inappropriate now. I do hope it doesn't happen. And if it happens, someone probably would get up and say, this is not the way to do it. So I think, that has changed. And also, so in my time, there were not so many role models. There were not so many women visible, like in the public arena, be it in politics in the Netherlands or in business or what have you. And so that has really changed. And I think that's a good thing, because if you see others do things that you aspire to, I always think, if she can do it, I can do it. And so I think that is really very different from when I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I fully agree. I was thinking, was it really more difficult before than now? I think indeed the big difference is how many women are doing things and what is expected of you as a woman. On the other hand, what I see as a big challenge for women now that we did not have is, I see social media offers a lot of opportunities, but also it offers a lot of pressure. And I think for us it was, of course you have your surroundings, but in the old days you had your own surroundings where the people around you, not the whole world. And nowadays with social media, it's like the whole world is all the time interfering with your choices, and you feel that you have to make choices all the time on everything. We were much more, I think, sort of go with the flow is maybe not the right way, but you made a choice and you just did it. And there wasn't zillions of other choices that also might have to be considered. I think so. So in that respect, I'm not sure if for us it was so much more difficult than for the women now.
Yeah, no, I think it's very different now.
Yes, exactly.
So there's different challenges. Yes. Yeah. So, for example, in my time, when I got children and I continued to work outside of the home, that was, in the beginning, it was still frowned upon. And so people would say, like, I remember going, bringing my kids to school, and then someone would say, "Oh, it's you today bringing the kids to school. Yeah, I admire you so much because you place your career at the forefront." And I would go like, "Oh gosh," like this passive aggressive thing. And I do hope that is different now. That that if you see someone struggling with work-life balance, that you say, "Can I help out?" And so. Which is not to say that there's no misogyny anymore. I think there's rampant sexism all around us. And I think we are calling that out much more than was done 40 years ago. Yeah.
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 Take care and enhance your beauty. Brands, empowering wellness through a selection of high-quality makeup brands.
But there is also hidden challenges, because we talked about social media, but something that's become apparent to me recently about this misogyny is that 22% of AI is scripted, created, and managed by men. Now, it's not necessarily their fault, but that would automatically have a male bias.
Yeah.
And whereas we think, I mean, I'm going to say this, but whereas we think in the 70s women fought for women's rights, for human rights, now we're seeing that there's a lot of subliminal masculinity that we may not be aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see these as real challenges?
yes,
What do
no,
you see as the
definitely.
biggest challenges?
Well, you just said it. I mean, the fact that people working in AI and are mainly men, but also, well, for instance, what does AI actually do? It's artificial intelligence, but it's based on whatever it finds on the internet. And whatever is to be found on the internet is, for a very large part, also written and put there by men. If you think about healthcare, data in healthcare, a lot of it comes from research on men, and so it's based on males, and that is a big disadvantage to women because their data doesn't show up as often. So that is a danger. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, like injustices and in society are basically reproduced and multiplied by AI, which is really not what you want. So, I mean, there's a multitude of studies that shows that, like, racism, for example, that people of color are really treated differently in terms of like how the data snap up at their names, or very different from people with a light color of skin. And that's not because AI is doing it, but it's because it is in our societies, and AI reproduces that. And I do think that's something to be very much aware of, and that there's not that it's mainly men working in that in AI and in tech is also not very helpful, I would say, because you have to have this. I mean, it's not a seventh sense; it's just common sense to, realize that these mechanisms are at play and try and mitigate them.
Absolutely. I mean, Madam Ambassador, you mentioned something just there. There's an absolute passion point of mine, and that is that 1% of medical research and investment outside of oncology is invested into female-related issues. That's PCOS, menopause, menstruation, all of these, 1%. It seems that we as women have come forward. We're stepped up post-war. We've stepped up. We've had the opportunities to have a career, but society hasn't quite caught up with us. And we're just saying, for the most part, well, women get on with it. And I hear that an awful lot on this show. Women get on with it, which is an absolute testament to women. But there are some areas I do believe that women should not just be getting on with it. And that's my question. What are the areas of challenges to women that women should not be tolerating, that women should actually be putting down their foot and saying, no, this is not okay?
So how long does this show run?
You can have as long as you're happy.
It's a very long list. No, but I think what you mentioned, healthcare is really something. And it's not that it popped up suddenly. I mean, feminists in the 70s already addressed the issue, but it has not changed a lot, unfortunately. That is one issue. Sexual and reproductive rights is another one. There's, and I hate to say it, but there's a lot of sexism and hate speech against women politicians. All politicians, have to face it, but it's much more stronger against women politicians. And so that means that, like, on a daily basis, you can get hundreds of messages saying, I mean, I'm not going to repeat it, but saying dumb things about you. And so that
Hurtful
makes
things
hurtful
also,
things
yes.
also. And so it really does not make it easier for women to be in the public arena. So in our country, we have these late night shows. And so people say, there's not so many women as guests in these shows. But many women say, I'm not going to go there. Why would I? Because, you get all this hate speech on social media because half of the country suddenly knows more about your subject, that, you have a PhD and than you. And so that really hampers women's presence in the public arena. That's really, that would be a big thing. Oh, yes.
Yes, up to a certain level, for sure. Yeah. I think not everybody that does it is really aware of how hurtful they actually are and what the impact is on everybody. But I think for quite a large group, it is. There is somehow still in society, I think, the idea that women have one place, and that is at home, and they have to look pretty, and they should not speak loud, and they should not be so opinionated. So there is a lot of that kind of still under surface, and that comes out, and so I think.
But Madam Ambassador, we are in 2025,
Yes.
2024, 2025. Why on earth, when you look at industry, when you look at post-war and the contributions that women are making to global economies, why is this happening?
And also, I mean, there is the contribution that women make, but there's also the potential that is, I mean, not being put to good use, so to say, of women's capacities and talents. I mean, there was this McKinsey report, and they calculated that, if women would have the same access to means of production and could be fully participate in economy and society, I think the world economy would grow in numbers of the American and the Chinese GDP combined. I mean, I'm not saying that our main ambition should be to have economic growth at that level, but it does say something about, I mean, even the potential that is unused, no? And it's a shame. I mean, it's a shame on an individual level, but also, I mean, for everyone. And then I do worry a lot about, and I'm not the only one, on the impact of hate speech on women's participation in politics, because the risk is that if you have ambition and you to go into politics and you see this happening, you might think, maybe not for me. I like my life like it is. I don't want to be harassed on a daily basis, and that makes. I mean, it diminishes the representation that we need in democracies. And what you hear from active politicians, women, is that they kind of go and do a kind of self-censorship sometimes. So either they do not contribute to social media anymore, which is not good because, I mean, you're a politician because you have opinions and, you should share those opinions. Or they go maybe not on this issue, maybe I should not speak out loud. And that, of course, undermines the quality of democracy. And that is hurtful. I mean, that hurts all of us. So, yeah, it's something that we really, I mean, and of course, on an individual level, I call on everyone and say, we're in this together and just go for it. And we help each other and we support each other. But still, I mean, it can be quite challenging.
It is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a vicious cycle, isn't there? Because if women are not decision makers, women's voice is not heard at a decision-making level, women are not present, women cannot be part of that conversation, and women are less likely to be considered. So, if I may, how then would you encourage a woman who has ambitions, just as you amazing ladies had, how would you encourage them to overcome that barrier that they are without a shadow of a doubt going to meet. I give you an example. We had the most incredible Eve Borge-Bonello on this show, on the Young Women's Edition, and I was gobsmacked. She was 18 years old. She went into politics, and at 18 years old, she was receiving death threats.
Yeah.
Death threats.
Yeah.
This is not okay
No,
in any
definitely.
society on any level. But unfortunately, just as you had mentioned before, social media and online is very much part of what we do. And therefore, those who wish to take such action can do so behind keyboards.
Right.
And keyboard warriors and abuse, online abuse, is very, very real. So how would you encourage and empower women to rise above? We're all human, and women who are empathic are more vulnerable to these comments, whether it be about what you're wearing, what you say, how your lifestyle, the very fact that you have a career and you're turning up with children to the school. How do we rise above that?
Yes. How do we do that? And well, we've done it, but in our times, indeed, we didn't have yet this whole social media thing happening. Now, I think if I look at my own daughter, I would hope that she, children do get raised also more savvy on internet and how to deal with it and how to interpret it. So to know when you can ignore things that happen online, maybe also indeed switch off sometimes, so you're not hurt by it, if possible. And if you are at a position where you have other people that can help you keep things away, make use of that. So try not to have these things really stop you, because in the old days, it was like words don't hurt, words. Okay, if somebody scolds you, you can get very depressed, but you can also think like, oh, they're just words. So that's easier said than done. Not everybody finds it an easy task, but that is a bit how you could try and cope with it. And as long as it stays with words and online keyboards, then fine. I mean, it gets more difficult if it's becoming physical, or maybe not really attacking, but you find things on your doorstep, which happens. These things happen too. Or when they start to approach your family or your children, then it becomes even more difficult. I don't know if I'm the one in a position to give a good advice how to deal with that. I think it's incredibly difficult. I just hope that if you feel that you have something to contribute, that you don't let these things stop you. If you believe in what you do, then follow on with it.
Yeah, and also, next to what the ambassador said, I think it's really important to say that this is not your individual problem. It's a problem that affects all of us, and so in order to deal with it, in the Netherlands we have women's organizations who promote women to go into politics. And at one point, Vote for a Woman is such an NGO, and they said, like, if we are going to call on women to step up and go into politics, then we also need to support them and give them training how to deal with these issues. And many political parties in the Netherlands are also doing that, like prepare women for what they, what might happen, and also make sure that they feel comfortable enough to talk about it, and again make it a collective problem is something I think which is really very, very important, because if you think it's your issue, then it becomes more difficult to address it than when we talk about it. And on an individual level, I think, so when I was in politics, I made a conscious decision. There is a group of people, if they have something to say about, my opinions or how I voice them, I will definitely listen to them, because that's what you do as a politician. You have to be open to criticism, because otherwise, you're representing people. You're not only representing yourself. but you can be selective of what criticism or reflection or feedback or however you want to call it, what feedback really you allow to really touch you, basically. And so there's tons of, people behind keyboards. I don't know them. I mean, what they think of me. I mean, yeah, please, get a life, do something funny, go out, walk your dog, but leave me alone. But of course, if, my staff would say something and say, you really did not do this well because A, B, and C, that I would take very seriously and try to, do better next time. So
it's that perspective, isn't it? It's that perspective on what matters and what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that applies not just to politics, but also to women who are seeking positions of authority within companies, within businesses, and so on. I was watching a documentary recently, and it was the contrast of a woman being called bossy and a man being called
strong. We've all been there. Yes,
have we?
Yes, yeah. And then for men, it's so good that he shows his emotions. But if one of us would do only, half of that, it would be hysterical. And so, and the thing with this is, we've all been raised in a context where, this has, set in our brains. And so for many people, it's not something that they do very consciously. Everyone has, experiences where you think, oh, I'm saying this, but is this really, this might be a prejudice instead of a real assessment. And so I think it's very good to have an open conversation about that, and also not be too judgmental from the start, and just ask someone, so why do you think I'm hysterical? So what makes you, give that appraisal to what I'm saying? And then together try and have a conversation to see if it, where that comes from, those differences. So yeah, I think that's, the dialogue really can make a difference here. Yeah, but it's true. There's a lot of, these, perspectives and perceptions going around that have been, that are culturally, that were culturally kind of ingrained in our brains. Yeah.
And not that long ago.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Djoeke, recommended by dermatologists. Anti-hair loss protocol. A concentration of aminexil in a scalp treatment to reduce hair loss by 29%. And in a stimulating shampoo to boost volume by 48%. A potent synergy for hair 3 times stronger. Anti-hair loss protocol. By Djoeke, the dermatological scalp and hair expert.
Periods are part of the game, but they don't have to throw you off your game. Try new Always Platinum for up to 100% leak protection, faster absorption, dry feel, and it's more cushiony, so you can focus on your game. It's a new period, always.
We as women have come so far in such a short period of time. I was trying to explain to somebody the other day that when you think about it, pre-war, pre-Second World War, women didn't have careers. Yeah. Women were, maybe if they had to go out to work, they went to work, but they were not career-minded. And that is a post-war phenomenon that is, 70 years we're looking at, 70, 80 years that's been part of our culture. And our culture has a long way to go to catch up, which is why we have some fundamental stumbling points. Mm-hmm. And it's the stumbling points that I want to just ask both of you. Madam Ambassador, you mentioned child marriage, and we're sitting here at the table, and to me, the idea, whilst I understand the cultural implications of it, but a child being 9 years old and being forced into marriage with somebody who is 3 times her age, and whatever happens within that relationship, that's a cultural implication. And you can understand why it happened and why that came about, to safeguard the future of the child, but it doesn't make it right. FGM, female genital mutilation, still takes place in a lot of countries. I work with an amazing lady, Sam Robedo, who's campaigning against that. But as she said, you have to draw alongside these cultures and you have to explain. why that is not something that is appropriate. And there are an awful lot more issues. But of course, you also mentioned about sexual reproductive rights. And I always come to this topic from a point of compassion, because I have my own opinions and they are not necessarily for this table. But if you take compassion out of the topic, we're talking about better sexual education. We're talking about, and I'm so grateful that just recently Malta has announced that emergency contraception is now going to be supplied, and it will be supplied free. And we've been a long time waiting for that to happen. Again, I grew up in a country where that wasn't even a question.
Yeah.
And also, of course, we're looking at terminations and so on. Very difficult, very, very difficult conversations to have. But I see so often that the compassion is removed from these conversations, and women are polarized. You either think one thing or another. Now, I know that this is a passion point for both of you, and I just want to throw it onto the table there. Why are we as women finding ourselves in these situations in 2024, 2025, where we are still fighting for basic human rights? Not women's rights, but human rights.
Yes.
And what do we do about that?
Exactly. How come?
Yeah.
That's the question. And then the answer. We don't have the answers, but we did try, and that's also one part of the reason why Lilianne is here with us at this time, to have that conversation also here in Malta.
Absolutely.
We've talked to a lot of people in Malta, and everybody is like, it's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
But even mentioning and naming the word abortion by itself is already very sensitive. And people prefer then to say a termination, indeed. We believe very strongly that having the conversation out on the table is so important. We talk to students, and what you see is you talk with the students who already sort of feel comfortable to discuss. Unfortunately, the students who feel less comfortable, they don't join in. And that is the challenge, how to also engage those students, and not only the students, but everybody in the population. Sex education, you mentioned it. It's so important that everybody really knows how their bodies work, how sex works, what is actually happening when you have sex, and what could be the consequences, and how to also prevent certain consequences, to help people in making choices for themselves. And indeed, there we come to the right thing, that ultimately we believe that it's very much indeed a private decision, that every person for themselves can decide how and what kind of choice they wish to make when it comes to sex, when it comes to reproduction, when it comes to being pregnant or not. That should not be anybody else's business. It should be your own business, whichever choice. And everybody should respect every choice. I mean, if you wish to make this choice, fine. If you wish to make another choice, also fine. It should not be that somebody or the state or anybody else decides what that choice should be. That's what I feel very, very strongly about. And fortunately, in my country, that is our shared opinion. Here we notice that this is a discussion that needs to be still had.
But at end, it's important to talk about it. And so, I mean, of course, I could now list all, the human rights treaties that, give guidance and say, people can decide about their own bodies. Everyone has a right to health, and states have an obligation to make sure that those rights are respected and enforced. And I'm not sure if that conversation is helping us in the polarization that is now happening. Ireland, for example, is a country where there was an absolute ban on abortion also for a very long time. That has changed now, and the people voted for that in a referendum. And so what happened what made it different from other referenda about the issue, what it made it different now is that the conversation started from the basic point that abortion is health care. And that choice is not about, like Madam Ambassador said, you have to do this or you should do that. No, choice is about your choice. But the government should make sure that you can that all choices are available to you. I mean, that's basically it. And then in the run-up to that referendum, the Irish people had conversations online, but also in city halls and, at kitchen tables. People went door to door talking about experiences of women who had an abortion or who had wanted an abortion, could not get one, or had to travel to another country. And those personal stories made the difference. And so one of the key takeaways of that campaign was someone you love might need your yes. And so it caters to what you said about compassion. And I think that is next to, of course, a conversation on, rights-based perspective. I think being willing to understand what the other person is trying to convey to you and trying to understand what brings people to certain choices without being judgmental. I think that could be very helpful in these kind of conversations. And again, of course, I'm a dedicated believer, and it's not an opinion, it's our right to decide about our own bodies. And I also know that some people are not very open to that kind of conversation. But I have never met anyone who did not want to listen to a personal story. And so I think that would be, but of course, people need to feel safe to come up with that story. That's also something. Yeah,
because I think one of the very important things that we also talked about these days is the fact that you can be against it. You can wish to make yourself different choices. You can put a ban on it, but it will still happen because in all the countries in the world, everywhere, people do make a decision, I want to terminate this pregnancy. If it's not available to them in a safe way, they will resort to unsafe ways. And here in Malta, what you see is we know that it's happening. There are statistical data available saying that so many women in Malta every year have an abortion. It's not talked about. It's not also discussed how these women go about it. Of course, the ones who have the money, they will go abroad. They will have it done somewhere else. Others who don't have the luxury to do that are confined maybe to very unsafe methods. But the most important fact is that you should have a discussion on these issues based on real facts. And often people tend to present a termination as if, it happens in the 8th month or something. The majority, really the big majority of abortions actually do take place in the first trimester. So in the very early stages, and they are medicinal. So there is not even a clinic or a doctor involved. Of course, there is a medication involved, and you would hope that you could have access to that medication. But it's not like something that happens all the time when a woman has already a big belly. Most of the time, it's a very different situation. And that is something that if you don't have that conversation, people don't realize. They get a very wrong perception on what actually is, what are we talking about? And that is very important that conversation is taking place. And it all starts with good education, sex education, and making these issues something that you find it normal to discuss, or to find it normal that if you go to your health practitioner to ask for help, that you get help and that you get an answer, and that you're not sort of too shy, or you don't dare even to go to your practitioner because you might face prosecution. And, these are the things that we feel are the first steps. It's not about gruesome things. No, it's only about how do we make sure that what is already happening happens safely.
Yeah.
And doesn't get you criminalized.
And I come back to that point of compassion, because in any situation in life, whether you are a mother or a father or a brother or a sister, or it happens to yourself, none of us can say that this is something that would not be a decision that we would have to one day face, or someone we love would have to one day face. And it's not a decision, I don't believe, I've had this conversation many times, I don't believe it's a decision that women relish. I think it's a decision that women fear, and that whole process is, where if a woman finds herself having to make that choice, is heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. And at that time, judgment is the last thing that woman needs, or her family.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned about these personal stories, there is one personal story that really resonates with me, and that is a lady whom I know who's very, very pro-choice, but had the opportunity to make that decision. And when it came to it, she said, no, actually, I'm going to go ahead with the pregnancy. It's not about that you say I need to terminate. It's about having the opportunity to make a choice when you really, really are in a situation that you don't want to be in. Yeah. And I think that's where the compassion is removed. Nobody wants to be in that position. If for emotional reasons, economic reasons, medical reasons, nobody wants to be there. But the reality is, you are there. Someone you love may be there. And the compassion has to be that you draw alongside, and just as you said, Madam Ambassador, you provide a safe means of dealing with the situation.
Yes. You approach it from the health perspective, indeed. You want to help women who are in a very difficult situation.
It's also a health issue. Yeah, it's also a health issue. Yeah. And also I think, so besides compassion, I think the next good thing to, bring into the debate are facts. So in my country, and I mean, I'm not saying that everything's perfect in the Netherlands, but we have one of the lowest number of abortions globally, and we have full access to contraceptives for everyone. Again, some improvements can be made, but generally speaking, everyone can access contraceptives. There's sexuality, age appropriate, of course, sexuality education in schools. And so everyone has information and can access ways to prevent the pregnancy if you don't want it, which makes for a lower number of abortions than in some countries where it's criminalized or totally banned. And so I think it's also good to bring these facts into the debate because it helps. I mean, it helps.
Whenever this matter arises, I always say, let's talk about what goes before we come to the matter in hand. Let's talk about everything, all the preventative. Let's put everything in place to prevent this situation being an issue before you come to the topic of abortion. If you don't have everything ahead of it, we're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah. And everybody only knows indeed what it actually means to have to make a choice at a certain point once you get there. Nobody else will know how it hits you. Only you, and you only know when it happens to you. So as long as you have not had to make a choice yourself, you don't even begin to know what it is for a woman who had to make the choice. I mean, I compare it maybe to the fact I'm a very late mother. I was already 40 when I had my first child, and that was not without a reason. It was because we had difficulties becoming pregnant. And I was a career woman and I worked, and so the issue of having children or not was never a big deal. And I didn't think that it would ever be a big deal until the moment came that I discovered that I made a choice. Oh, it would be nice to have a child. And then it didn't work. It became such a big thing. And I would have never, ever thought myself, if you had asked me 2 years or 3 years before, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't bothering me at all. And I thought, oh, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And, fine. No, it wasn't fine at all. I mean, there I was, career woman, and I was like devastated and very, very emotional. And, oh, now I never have children. And I saw myself already like, oh, God. And to me, it was such a big surprise. But fortunately, of course, we are very advanced where it is helping people who can't, conceive naturally, to help them. So that in the end, and I was so fortunate and very lucky that it worked in the end. But I would have never, ever, ever thought that me crying in my bed because I couldn't have a baby was like ridiculous. You cannot comprehend such things until it actually touches you. And I have the strong conviction that it must be exactly the same for if you come for the choice that, oops, I'm pregnant. Oh my God, what now?
Yeah.
It's not oops. No, then it becomes really very tough. And then to have to face a society that is maybe condemning you or that you don't know where to go or who can help must be so awful. So that is really why I feel very strong about this topic, and that I really, really feel that it's important that also in Malta the conversation starts. I mean, it is starting. I mean, there are researchers and young people already have a different view. They can look at different aspects, especially if it's about whether or not it should be criminal, and whose choice in the end it should be. So maybe someday, but it's a difficult one.
Madam Ambassador, you said something incredibly important there, because it is an experience of a woman.
Yeah.
Whether she is in a relationship with a man, whether she's married, whether she's in a partnership, but it's happening to her. And she is the person, I think, that it's happening to her body. It's happening to her family, if that's part of the dynamic. And because of this, I'm going to come to my closing question. Because of this, that's why I believe that it's incredibly important to have women as key parts of the discussion of issues that face women. And therefore, I'm going to ask you, both of you, to close with a statement, close with your thoughts that would empower women to become part of that decision-making process on a national scale, on an international scale, or even on a local scale. How can you impassion? How can you empower? How can you motivate women to step up to be part of this?
I'll leave the last word for Madam Ambassador, but let me say that so there's a lot of things that can be done, and so again, one of the things that I do is that there's a lot of younger women that I talk with who, come to me and share their experiences. And I think it's really very helpful to support one another in any way that you can. I think that's the main thing. And on an individual level, I mean, this is, of course, I said something about it at the start of the conversation. So my parents put so much trust and confidence in me, basically. And so I would wish that for everyone, that there's at least two people in this world that think that you can do anything you want. And so to encourage your children, to have that trust in themselves also makes it more easy to fail sometimes, because, I mean, not everything is like, rosy. So I would call, I mean, many, especially, women, the message that they get too often is that you're not good enough. But my message is always, you're much better than everyone else thinks, including yourself, than you think you are. So yeah, some trust and self-confidence. Yeah, better be overconfident than too shy.
I like that.
double that.
Yeah.
But I would like to add also, I mean, we're talking about women. I think the role models, indeed, my mom was a very strong role model, but indeed, I think especially maybe for daughters, also the role that the dad has, the father. So the men in your relationship, I hope and I wish that every girl finds also indeed the support, but not only from the other women, but also from the men in their circle. That would be my wish.
Absolutely. What a beautiful way to finish. Lilianne Ploumen and Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for being at my table and sharing such incredible thoughts.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Thank you.